As soon as Donald Trump was elected and began talking about repealing the IRA and the subsidies, we told them all Ontario is 100% in with the subsidies that, with the investments, as we call them, that we agreed to in the first place. With or without the IRA, you can count on Ontario.
In the middle of one of the most uncertain chapters in North American trade, Canada is holding the line. As President Trump ramps up tariff threats and strips away nearly all electric vehicle subsidies in the United States, the logic would suggest Canada should pull back, rethink its own plans, reassess the risks. But that's not what's happening. From Windsor to St. Thomas and across Ontario's industrial heartland, Canada is doubling down. Its electric vehicle strategy isn't just surviving the pressure, it's becoming a symbol of economic sovereignty.
The path to a possible deal is riddled with uncertainty, and on top of tariffs, U.S. President Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill leaves some big, unanswered questions about the future of electric vehicles in Canada.
Last week, President Trump signed the Big Beautiful Bill, which effectively repealed most federal tax credits for electric vehicles in the U.S. For Canada, this was a major disruption. Many of its EV investments, over 30 billion Canadian dollars in joint federal-provincial commitments, were designed with alignment to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. Battery hubs like Windsor and St. Thomas were suddenly exposed to market risk. Honda even paused its project for 2 years. But instead of pulling back, Ontario responded with clarity. Every dollar committed will remain committed. The province, along with the federal government, is protecting 100,000 existing auto jobs and aiming to create tens of thousands more. A $30 billion contingency, described as firepower, has been set aside to support manufacturers through tax relief and targeted programs. Ontario is also making a broader point, that Canada remains a stable, rules-based environment. Over the last 2 years, it has attracted 184 international companies, secured $70 billion in new investment, and created 18,000 manufacturing jobs. As global firms look for alternatives to the volatility in U.S. politics, Canada is offering reliability. Despite policy headwinds, the electric vehicle market is not slowing down. Global EV sales rose 25% in 2024, according to the International Energy Agency. Canada's federal mandate to require 20% of all new vehicle sales to be electric by 2026 remains unchanged. While some automakers are asking for delays, Ontario argues that abandoning the target would risk wasting billions already invested in infrastructure and production. By staying on course, Canada positions itself as a credible EV hub for Europe and Asia, partners looking for supply chains that aren't bound to Washington's policy swings. This isn't just industrial planning, it's an insurance policy. All of this plays out under the shadow of looming tariffs. President Trump has threatened to impose a 35% tariff on Canadian goods starting August 1st unless a new trade agreement is reached. Talks are ongoing, but the Canadian side admits there's little visibility. Even ministers say privately that they don't know how close or far apart the two sides are. Still, Ontario is preparing for every outcome. The EV investments are not contingent on Washington's behavior. And if a deal doesn't come, the transition doesn't stop. It continues, backed by the funding and political will already in motion.
Hopefully, we can manage that number down, and hopefully we can preserve our broader market access. But gosh, it's so challenging.
Canada's insistence on holding the EV line is about more than electric cars. It's about proving that a country can chart its own course, even in the face of economic pressure from its largest trading partner. In a world of volatile politics, trust is currency, and Canada is betting that, in the long run, trust will outlast tariffs.
Canada's new government will do several things. First, we will take a series of measures to stabilize our domestic steel market and prevent harmful trade diversion arising from current trade tensions.
When President Trump raised tariffs to 50% on Canadian steel in early June, the blow was immediate. Within days, exports collapsed, jobs were cut, and one of Canada's most tightly integrated cross-border industries found itself severed from its biggest customer. This week, Prime Minister Mark Carney finally responded, not with threats or retaliation, but with something more calculated, a structural shift, one designed not just to react, but to rebuild.
The trade actions of the United States are further transforming global steel market dynamics and supply chain. Let's be clear. Canada will be one of the countries most impacted by these developments.
The plan starts with a clear message. Canada will no longer be the world's most open steel market. For decades, nearly 2/3 of Canada's steel consumption has come from imports, while over 90% of its steel exports flowed south to the United States. Now, that equation is being rewritten. By the end of this month, Canada will implement strict tariff rate quotas. For countries without a free trade agreement, imports will be capped at 50% of their 2024 volumes. Anything above that will face a 50% tariff. For FTA partners, the cap is 100%, with the same 50% penalty beyond the threshold. A second, more targeted measure aims directly at Chinese origin steel. Any product containing steel melted and poured in China, regardless of where it's finished, will face additional tariffs, with one exception. U.S. steel remains untouched under existing CUSMA terms. This isn't retaliation, it's insulation.
So moving forward, we must diversify our trade relationships. And above all, we must rely more on Canadian steel for Canadian projects.
Rather than escalate tensions, Carney is using this moment to reorient the domestic market. That means investing, not just protecting. The federal government will inject $1 billion through the Strategic Innovation Fund. This money is earmarked for Canadian steel producers to modernize equipment, produce higher-value products, and fill the gaps left by lost U.S. contracts. To support workers directly, $70 million will be funneled through labor market development agreements, covering training and income assistance for up to 10,000 steel employees. An additional $150 million in regional support will be prioritized for steel-producing communities, alongside expanded loan access for mid-sized firms, lowering entry requirements, cutting interest rates, and extending loan terms from 5 to 7 years. But perhaps the most transformative change is in federal procurement. Going forward, government contractors will be required to use Canadian steel in major infrastructure, housing, and defense projects. From shipyards to bridges, the steel that builds Canada will now come from within. All of this unfolds in the shadow of Trump's tariff threats. Canada's position is precarious. A 35% blanket tariff on all Canadian goods is scheduled to begin August 1st, unless a bilateral deal is reached first. And yet, Ottawa has not retaliated. Instead, it's holding the door open, keeping tariffs off U.S. steel for now, while maintaining strategic leverage elsewhere. Digital services taxes have been paused. Canada has engaged in fentanyl coordination. Every move is part of a broader strategy to stay at the table, without appearing weak. Though the Prime Minister has acknowledged that no country has secured a deal with the U.S. free of tariffs under this administration, his approach suggests a pivot. The focus now is not on removing tariffs entirely, but shaping where and how they apply. The likely target is a reduced selective rate, 8% to 10% instead of 35%, with carve-outs for essential sectors like autos, energy, and metals.
Say we will continue to do business with the U.S. That's of the year, but we will also work with new partners or partners that we have not developed commercial relationship as deep as the U.S. one, including, of course, with Europe and key Asian countries.
Canada isn't just responding to a crisis. It's laying the foundation for a more self-reliant economy, one where steel is not just exported, but embedded in national development. This shift won't bring back every job. It won't reverse every lost shipment. But it offers breathing room and a pathway forward. Whether or not a deal is reached by August 1st, Canada has already begun to decouple its industrial future from Trump's unpredictability and place it firmly in Canadian hands.
So many issues involve U.S.-Canada relationships that it's like shooting your sibling in the heart, I can't believe we're doing what we're doing.
Tariffs are tools. But in today's trade war, they've become something more. Symbols of disruption, wielded personally by Donald Trump. This latest escalation didn't come from Beijing or Brasilia. It came from Washington. And it wasn't aimed at rivals, but at Canada. For decades, the United States and Canada weren't just trading partners. They were collaborators in manufacturing, in defense, in shaping the global economy. Now, that foundation is cracking. And for the first time, the pushback is coming not just from Ottawa, but from Washington insiders themselves. Carla Hills, who once led America's NAFTA negotiations, is sounding the alarm. Not with politics, but with history. Because what's happening now isn't just a trade dispute. It's a breakdown, triggered by Trump, but felt across borders.
What do you make of Trump issuing this tariff threat in the middle of trade talks? Things look to be going in the right direction. It seems like there was some positive signals being sent. Now he's just dumped this on us.
Trump's tariff-first approach has left allies scrambling. And among those most concerned are the very people who once helped build the North American trading system. Carla Hills, former U.S. trade representative, isn't known for dramatic language, but even she has called the situation a self-inflicted wound, comparing it to turning on your own sibling. For her, the damage isn't abstract, it's operational. Cross-border supply chains, especially in autos and manufacturing, rely on predictability. Trump's surprise escalations are replacing that with chaos. Planning has become guesswork. From small businesses in Michigan to parts manufacturers in Ontario, firms are holding back on hiring, investing, and signing long-term contracts. And the economic toll is measurable. A Yale study in July 2025 projected the disruption could cut Canada's GDP by 2.1% and cost American households over $2,500 annually due to inflation. Trump promised control. What businesses got was confusion.
What I wanted to emphasize today is, as Minister in charge of industries and of the economy, is we are not alone in this world. We need to be closer to our allies.
Instead of reacting emotionally, Canada is shifting strategically and sending a message that it won't wait for Trump's mood to change. Just weeks before the latest escalation, Prime Minister Carney signed a new agreement with the European Union. More than a trade deal, it includes coordination on industrial policy, defense, and strategic industries. This wasn't a press stunt, it was a pivot. And while Carney keeps negotiations private, Industry Minister Melanie Joly has taken the lead in economic diplomacy. Her approach is quiet but pointed. Canada is protecting jobs not through retaliation, but through realignment. Under CETA, trade with the EU continues to expand. And Joly is working to accelerate full ratification across Europe, even as 10 member states have yet to finalize the agreement. Her message is simple. Trump may be closing doors, but Canada is opening others. The longer Trump leans into unpredictability, the more Canada leans out. What began as a dispute is fast becoming a divorce. Ottawa is meeting with Berlin, Brussels, and Paris, building alternative supply chains and co-investment pathways that exclude the U.S. And the U.S. isn't just losing trade, it's losing credibility. Veteran negotiators like Hills have warned that leadership is about consistency, but Trump's tariff policy has been anything but. And with each new escalation, that inconsistency drives partners further away. Canada isn't just adjusting, it's repositioning structurally and strategically for a post-Trump economic landscape. Trade is more than numbers, it's trust. And once that trust is broken, through chaos, threats, or shifting rules, rebuilding it isn't simple. Trump may see tariffs as leverage, but his former allies now see them as warnings. Canada is adapting. Europe is welcoming. And if this trend holds, Trump's greatest legacy may not be manufacturing revival, but the fragmentation of a continent-spanning alliance.